and thank you everybody who's joined this evening. It's great to have so many people coming to the meeting and really taking interest in this most important of issues. I'm just going to really briefly outline the plan itself, what's in it, and a little bit about where it came from as well, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with already, but I think it's worth setting that backstory. Also for anyone who might be watching future wanting to find out more about the Citizens Assembly in particular and what came of it. As you may know, 2019 was a really pivotal year for understanding about the climate emergency in general, but certainly here in Camden, we really wanted to work out the best way to make a difference, to galvanise action by the community, by the council itself, by everybody really who needs to play a role in reducing carbon. Towards the beginning of the year, last year was clear the scale of the emergency. We wanted to respond. Our 10-year Green Action for Change plan was coming to an end this year in any case, so we knew we wanted to review that and set a new plan for the future. So the council had already conducted a Citizens Assembly, which led to the Camden 2025 corporate plan. The spirit of that was very much about shared endeavour and about bringing as many people along as you can do, making sure people's voices are heard, because without that you can't bring about real change. So in that spirit, we set about beginning the Citizens Assembly. We had a prior consultation online where we managed to gather in many views about how to cut carbon across the borough. Citizens Assembly itself took place in July over 3 sessions. From that, the citizens gave 17 recommendations, which the council then took forward and adopted in the October 2019 full council with a cross-party motion declaring a climate emergency, incorporating those 17 recommendations. And from there, working on the new plan for the next 5 years, which is what we're talking about tonight. And of course, that plan contains those 17 recommendations, which if you've had a chance to read the plan, you'll see includes everything from planting more trees and creating more allotments. And these are the actual words from the citizens. Piloting community energy heating scheme, encouraging low carbon dietary choices, setting up a climate emergency scrutiny panel, which I'll be able to say a bit more about later, planting more trees, greening the council's own operations. So a really good range of things, which I think really helpfully respond to the kind of nature and scale of the challenge before us. So our vision for the next 5 years and up to 2030 is to achieve a net zero carbon Camden by 2030. And we're saying that this will require everybody living and working in Camden to be playing their part. But the council's role is to be enabling and supporting people to do so. So we'll need to lead by example to drive down carbon emissions on our own estate and throughout our own operations. And then within that kind of high level vision, we've identified 4 pillars of action, if you like, each with their own visions, which again relate to the challenges before us. So we have a section called People, where we know that everybody's own behaviour helps create carbon here or generate it elsewhere. Our own behaviour can help reduce this. So we're saying for people, everybody who lives, works, studies and visits Camden will be well informed and will be actively contributing to tackling the climate crisis in all aspects of our lives. So that's where we want to get people to within the borough. On buildings, this is a really important section. We want to say that Camden's buildings will be energy efficient, comfortable, fit for purpose for a zero carbon future. And that's important because of the huge contribution that buildings make to the carbon contribution in Camden. We've identified a pillar which we're calling Places, which is that Camden's public spaces will encourage and enable healthy and sustainable travel choices and promote biodiversity. And then organisations, all organisations will operate responsibly and be embedding tackling climate crisis in their operations. It's worth mentioning, I can see the Camden Climate Change Alliance logo on the screen there. That's an organisation we set up 12 years ago, which has really thrived ever since and which works with businesses throughout Camden. I think 300 member organisations now also open to schools and community organisations. So really a wide range of groups we want to get involved. So please do do get involved, join the Camden Climate Change Alliance, or tell others about it. There's also a number of guiding principles that underpin the Climate Action Plan, which are that our action should be firmly rooted in evidence, so we're actually taking decisions on a solid basis. We want to make sure that social justice and inclusion are really at the heart of everything we do, so we know all about the social inequality that's closely linked to the climate challenge, both within Camden, within the UK, and across the world. We're going to follow the principle of showing leadership by example, which I've mentioned already. So this is the council acknowledging our own role as a local leader and doing what we can on the climate crisis. Fourth is the shared endeavour, which I mentioned as well, which is that to achieve the goals that we have, we need to bring everybody with us. And finally, it's to acknowledge the urgency of the situation, which is something we made clear in the Climate Action Plan, in the Climate Emergency Declaration that we adopted last year, which was to be truthful with everybody in Camden and anyone who will listen really about the seriousness of the situation. That's a very brief overview. There's a lot of actions in the plan. There's a lot of work to be getting on with, as you can see. We need all of your help to be achieving those. I will just mention here, take this opportunity to highlight the Citizens Panel. So not the Citizens Assembly, but the Citizens Panel, which we've committed to introducing. So this is an ongoing monitoring panel, if you like, of citizens who will be trained up and examining the work that the council is doing, which is complementary to a number of other things we've brought in. So we've now got a high-level internal officer panel working on climate action within the council and make sure we're greening our operations as the citizens recommended. So just on the citizens panel itself, we're going to be recruiting 15 citizens, which we want to be very diverse and representative of our community here in Camden. It's helpful if people have some knowledge of the climate crisis already, but there's no prior need to, because we'll be educating and training the citizens. The meetings will be quarterly and it will last 2 years. So if you'd like to be involved, if you know people you'd like to be involved, please get in touch. That will be on the We Are Camden website, I think, as of tomorrow. So that's just a few opening lines. Hope that's helpful. Thank you again.
Thanks very much, Councillor Harrison. Yeah, there'll be more information about the citizen panel on the screen later on. So don't worry about that for the time being, but you're welcome to join. All the details will be there for you. I should just add that, in terms of the questions, please feel free to add questions as we go along in the chat bar, so that we can collate those and then consider them during the Q&A at the end. So don't wait until the Q&A starts to post those questions. So that's just a point of note. So I'm now going to hand over to Anna Pick, who was one of the Assembly members, and Anna's just going to say a few words about her experience on the Citizens Assembly of last year. So Anna, welcome. Thanks for joining again tonight.
Thanks so much, Harold. It's very weird speaking to like a row of icons, but I'm going to do my best. It's really great to be invited back to speak, and I'm really happy to have followed the process all the way from the Assembly last summer to this point. The Citizens Assembly, I thought, was a really incredible process and had a really powerful effect on me just personally. I felt much more connected to my community. It really mobilized me to get more involved in climate activism, which has been a great thing over the past few months. And it definitely also convinced me that public deliberation can be a really powerful tool as we're facing crises like these, especially crises that electoral politics have failed to properly address so far. I want to make also just to say that it's great also to see the 17 proposals put forward by the Assembly all featuring in this action plan. That's really fantastic, and great to see the net zero target too by 2030. 3 quick points on the action plan. The first is that I think Camden's shown a really incredible commitment to engaging communities, and that's just been reinforced by Adam there, to involving communities in decision making. And I think the Assembly, as well as local groups and businesses, should feel definitely like joint ownership of this plan and are ready to help in its implementation. So we're hoping that the council stays really open to genuine dialogue and engagement, and looking forward to seeing more details about the scrutiny panel and other channels that will make that possible. that was something that featured really strongly in the Assembly. There was definitely a strong desire for more engagement, more frequent engagement. And also, we're hoping to see some more measurable targets in the plan that will make genuine scrutiny possible. The second point I wanted to make is that obviously the delivery of this plan is happening in the context of a global pandemic, and it's really fantastic to see Camden driving this forward, even as it responds to the pandemic in the local community. It feels like the pandemic's really shown how important our local communities are for care and support. But the other thing it feels like it's shown us is that governments, local and national governments, can act in extraordinary ways in extraordinary times. And if the Assembly agreed on one thing, it's that these are extraordinary times, and that the climate and ecological emergency represents a really extraordinary threat. So now that we've seen what's possible in the COVID response, I think people won't buy the excuse any longer that we can't move further and faster on this crisis too. So we'll be watching and hoping that this receives the same urgency and attention. And lastly, I just wanted to encourage the Council to incorporate the climate justice angle more explicitly into the plan. The Assembly really brought this into focus, having a representation of the borough, made really clear that we need to address inequality at the same time. And more recently, it feels like the Black Lives Matter movement has shown how much extreme violence and discrimination intersect with climate change and environmental threats. So that feels like it should be front and center of this work, in the information campaign, in the citizen engagement, and in all of the rest of the work too. So just to finish, as I said last time at the full council meeting, I came away from the process feeling really hopeful. It feels like Camden can really set the bar on local climate action. The council put its trust in us to help come up with some solutions, and we're now putting our trust in the council to help deliver them, and looking forward to working together to do that over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, very much. Yeah, I mean, definitely very important points. And as officers, I just want to reassure you that, you know, we're really, really committed to continuing to work with the community. And it's quite incredible to see all the familiar names on this meeting tonight. You know, many of you are people we've worked with, and it's great to be able to continue to work with you as we take this forward. And I'm now going to hand over to Farhana Yamin, who was instrumental in setting up Think and Do that many of you will have heard about in Camden. It was a pop-up climate shop on Kentish Town Road that, despite the pandemic, has carried on operating in the borough. So Farhana, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, really echoing what you've just said, Harold, about looking at the participants list and seeing so many people, you know, especially so many of you visited the pop-up, which was in Kentish Town Road, just opposite the library. And I put on the picture there the car park of number 19, you know, which some of you may recognize, and the new sort of wildflower meadow, which has been sort of has popped up by itself in the last week or so, that is going to be a base for the next phase of one part of Think and Do. I think Think and Do ties in very much with the spirit of collaboration and with the spirit of citizens' actions and, you know, being led and being for people to improve their neighbourhoods and to have a voice and a say, and especially tying in with the theme that Anna picked out, and which is very close to my heart. It's something that I've worked on all my working life, which is really to tie in climate action with social change, with social justice. You know, one without the other is no good. You can't just deal with climate through sort of carbon markets and taxes. It doesn't get to the heart of things. And in fact, citizens and the ways in which we tackle how we live, how we work, how we commute, how we spend our lives at home and in our neighbourhoods is a critical part of the equation. So as many of you know, we had this idea of the pop-up over the summer months, actually, at the same time that the Citizens' Assembly was going forward. And the reason was, you know, to have a way in which we could carry on brainstorming, chatting, talking, cooking up ideas ahead of almost, and as well as whatever citizen assembly process would come out, as well as whatever would come out in the formal climate action plan. And so that is one of the reasons why it's fantastic to have all of these different strands, the accountability side, the citizen assembly side, the planning side, plus also these, and it's a tremendous opportunity to now look at the way in which we can convert underused or disused, premises. We may have many offices which will, lay empty or half empty, and provided we can find a model which does it safely, we can make good those spaces and put them for community use in ways that we found at Think and Do. There was a yearning, a huge appetite for different community groups who had been working on different types of issues and ordinary citizens to work together. So as soon as you provided a physical kind of hub and said, as we did later when COVID struck, here is a virtual space. Would you like to collaborate? Would you like to showcase your project? Would you like to learn about someone else's project? That was a very, very positively received. So we feel that there is something really tremendously exciting about this new way of working, where we see each other. We see each other's constraints. As citizens, we can't just change our behaviour overnight unless that's supported by other members of our household, by what's going on in schools, by what's going on in communities, by what's going on, in terms of road planning, transport, all of the other things that are necessary. So it's, behaviour change is exciting at an individual level, but you can often feel very lonely, and it's very difficult to change the fundamental things without that collective action, both locally and nationally and internationally. So that's, I think, where we come in. I've find some of the exciting ideas that have bubbled up from, again, a very exciting set of partnerships that we have. Sometimes we're incubating ideas for maybe a community-run kitchen to work out of the new Highgate Centre. The temporary orchard garden is already sort of taking shape. We want to invite really inspirational leaders and ordinary people to come and talk about their ideas, and we have already linked up with Culture Declares Emergency and many of the artistic and local cultural groups in Camden and nationally. We're going to try and work a lot with other groups and focus on especially the areas identified in the Climate Action Plan at Camden, targeting fashion, food growing, waste, plastics. There are emergent or actual projects in all of those coming up. And you can follow us on Twitter. And I think a lot of the energy certainly that we have, we realised, is to try and get more Think and Do's across Camden and hopefully across London and maybe all across the UK and the world. But focusing first, I think, on my personal target, I would love to have at least a Think and Do space, whether it operates for a week, a month, 6 months, in each high street, in each ward, and to make that possible for you. And we'll try and develop toolkits and what we think has worked well and where we found difficulties. So I really want to end by asking and making an ask and a call for action for all of you who are here to please contact us. We have done a lot of this on a shoestring and largely on the excitement and the energy of people who want to do more, who realise that each and every one of us has to think and do something different and is ready to join hands and do that. So please join us and follow us on Twitter, on Insta. Please get in touch with us. And if you're interested, know a premise or could help make a premise available, we're trying to target at the moment, we have projects going on in schools, a sustainability network. We wanted to try and have a pop-up already and would have had one had it not been for COVID. We had a pop-up already designed for Tate Modern, which would have showcased some of the things that we've done. Feeling the sort of frustrations a little bit of the setback, but at the same time, I'm tremendously excited that Camden is, still pioneering and leading the way on action. So look forward to, taking forward the people part of the agenda coming up. Thank you.
Thanks, Farhana. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. The think and do concept's been brilliant, and the action plan does indeed really explicitly talk about how we can support its development. And I can see quite a few questions, comments in the chat box about opportunities already. So let's try and build on those. And just a reminder in the chat box, the idea of that is very much to pose questions that we can consider in the Q&A. Of course, inevitably there'll be some there that are about statements and thoughts, and that's okay, but let's try and keep it for questions so that we can really come back to those in a bit. So I'm now going to hand over to Rachel Urquhart, who is at Parliament Hill School and has been instrumental in the school sustainability network we have in Camden called the Sustainers. So Rachel, over to you just to tell us a bit about the work at Parley.
Great, thank you very much. I should say that really I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of the students of Parliament Hill School, because they've been a huge source of excitement and energy, to use Farhana's words, around climate action. And I guess Sustainers was a bit of a catalyst back, I think it was 2018 actually, that it may have launched, with a small group of Year 8 students who had their H2WO project to reduce plastic water bottles in school. And then over that year, with the UK Student Climate Network and the strike movement, that it just grew hugely, and we were having weekly meetings of up to 80 students rammed into a classroom of all year groups. They did a fantastic job of really mobilising their peers. They declared their war on plastic, so they took it beyond the water bottles, and really went out into the community as well, doing their litter picking. And this was just in a matter of a couple of months, really, that they set this up. And the thing that I was really impressed by was how they took responsibility for sort of bringing their peers on board and set up their own whole school education program, where they led workshops, film screenings, assemblies. They went to the governor's meeting. They went out into the community, took part in community events, took part in the consultation. And then the thing that's really changed things and ramped things up even more again this year is our link to Think and Do, and the continued support we've had through Sustainers has just kept ideas coming. They've really valued it, and there's a sense of momentum, and that behaviour is changing. The girls conducted a waste audit in the school and presented it to the whole staff training, where they really challenged their teachers a lot to rethink their waste in the school, giving speeches and really kind of seeing their role as educating the adults in the school as well. And they just launched their big clothes swap shop project before the lockdown, and we're looking forward to a big gardening project starting in the summer. So we've got that to look forward to still. We know we've got a lot more to do. They really want to see this front and centre in our school culture. So when we get back in September, there's a lot more for us to do. I guess the thing to flag up is that we've got a real challenge around kind of time and capacity. All the things that they do outside of school, it is a challenge to find the time in the curriculum. It's only going to become harder when we go back in September. So the support we have from Camden is really helpful in sort of making those decisions around time for this. Waste management has been a big challenge for us, because as an individual school, we don't necessarily make those decisions. So again, having the link to the waste management companies that are involved is really helpful through Camden. And I think we're just starting to really explore what more we can do, particularly around food waste. In our school, I know other schools have moved forward a bit further on food waste. And then catering is a big challenge. This is the thing, if you talk to the girls, that they're still really up in arms about, is the amount of plastic in the catering. And it's a continued issue that we really want to crack this year. And that's something, again, that we need to work sort of borough-wide to get the support on that. Going forward, the thing we're looking forward to is working more with the other schools. I know I'm speaking just about Parliament Hill here, but we know that there's a lot more work going on in primary schools around us, in the other schools around us. We've worked a bit with William Ellis School, where their older boys gave fantastic speeches down at Think and Do around fast fashion, which really inspired our students. We've got more work to do with our partners like Caterlink and Veolia, as I mentioned, around waste management and catering. And we really want to launch our food growing project. And I hope that's something that will feed into the work of this action plan, because I see that is something we want to do front and centre. But I guess this was just to give you a flavour of just one school and the amount of action that is taking place. And it really has been sort of spurred on by the momentum in the community, and the work, particularly of Think and Do, and the support that we've had. And so we look forward to that continuing to be a part of making this happen, and supporting the community with this action plan further.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's a great summary of the work that's been going on at Parley, and I totally agree. We need to try and get this across all of the schools in Camden. I think we're planning to have a school summit when the schools go back towards the end of the autumn term, and that would be a great opportunity, I think, to bring some of these schools together and learn from the work you've been doing. I'm going to hand over to Emma Shaw now from the Library of Things, which sounds like a rather unusual name, but Library of Things is a great circular economy initiative, and it kind of exemplifies how high streets could perhaps change as a result of, or not as a result, but in response, I guess, to renewal and recovery after this pandemic. And so have a listen to this. It's fascinating, the work that they're doing. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Harold, and hello everyone from afar. It's great to be here. I'm a Camden resident, so I have a vested interest in this action plan, as well as having the opportunity to share with you a bit more about Library of Things. I'm aware some people might not know what it is, so a quick introduction to Library of Things. We're a social enterprise. Our mission is to make borrowing better than buying. And that means that we're all about saving people money and reducing waste by affordably renting out products that they would otherwise have to buy. So things like drills and carpet cleaners, sewing machines, pressure washers, hedge trimmers, you name it. There's 50 different products. And we source those products directly from quality manufacturers who we've vetted for very good kind of durability and sustainability. So manufacturers like Bosch and Karcher who make DIY and cleaning products. And then we lend those out to residents in two ways. Normally through kiosks like what you're looking at here. This is a self-serve item rental kiosk that is living inside a community-run library in Crystal Palace in South London. And the products live inside the kiosk, and you simply reserve the item you need on our website, collect it and return it through the system. In response to the COVID lockdown, because the library is closed, we've also been running a home delivery service. So we can also continue to get products to residents in that way at the moment, and hopefully ongoing. And this whole system really started with a group of friends and neighbours in South London, near Brixton, where we were living. We were all volunteers for a number of years until we developed the system that meant that it could run without us being there around the clock, and also that we could become an established social enterprise, and now able to grow across London. So we are currently looking for new council partners and community partners across London to bring Library of Things to new neighbourhoods. So that's about us. And in terms of what we do and how it supports the climate plan, I'll take you through kind of three main steps about how we do that. So firstly, the obvious thing is we lend items to the public, and that has a direct impact on people's purchasing habits. You don't have to buy anymore, you can borrow from a range of products instead. What we see here is the kind of behaviour change and waste prevention. So 1 in 4 of the borrows through our platform prevents a purchase of an item, and that in turn spares landfill from being created and the associated carbon emissions. So that's a direct effect. And then around that, what we see is more of a community being built up around that sustainable consumption. So we host repair parties, mending meetups, upcycling workshops, a whole range of skill sharing events so that people can build confidence in DIY and learn how to repair their own things. And in our kind of impact evaluation we did last year, 60% of our borrowers were more likely to repair or recycle once they'd borrowed an item, because I think it's a gateway into thinking differently about how we access products. The second point, which is important to us, is about affordability and accessibility. The point being that you shouldn't have to pay a premium to shop greener. And so we're really invested in being able to mainstream access to sustainable behavior like this. Our pricing itself is very affordable. If you have a look on our website, it will cost you 5% of the cost to buy a drill to rent it for the day. So that's £7 for a drill for a day. And then we have a concession rate available on an opt-in basis. If people would like more affordable borrowing, they can get an additional discount. We install these kiosks into very accessible spaces, which is why libraries are an ideal fit for us, because a whole range of people visit libraries and they're often open 5 or 6 days a week. And we build in participation so that once you've borrowed an item, you're invited along to those skills events and volunteering opportunities to build confidence and also build relationships with your neighbours. And the final point I'll mention is about our supply chain. So those manufacturers like Bosch, they themselves have commitments to reducing their carbon emissions, and they are generally very good quality, family-owned brands. So they have a long-term outlook. And they see Library of Things as a new route to market. They're moving away from traditional retail. We provide them with product level data on what works, what doesn't, what users like, which part breaks first. And so as a result, in the long term, really fewer products will be manufactured and those emissions spared from the supply chain. Just to wrap up those points, I think, this is one example of a business. We're unusual because we're a social enterprise. So our primary goal is not profit, it's impact. And so we're able to deliver climate targets in partnership with councils because this is what we do for a living. And I think as part of delivering this plan, it would be really exciting to look for other social enterprises that have that same purpose, and ideally those that are homegrown in Camden. Not to say that bigger companies with CSR departments would be equally well aligned. But I think the benefit of a small company is that we're very close to our supply chain and we're very close to our users. And I think this falls into the kind of scope 3 of the plan. It's a bit more about the indirect kind of carbon savings, but behavior change is a very powerful way of us all sort of contributing towards lifestyle changes that will ultimately save carbon. Just one final invitation, if you'd like to see a Library of Things in Camden, then you can pop yourself on a map on our website. If you go to the About tab and New Sites, there's a map there you can fill in, and it would be great to see where you are so we know where to bring a kiosk to next. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. That's going to be a busy map, I expect, by tomorrow morning, given the chat going on at the moment. But thanks a lot. So look, last chance to sort of get the questions into the meeting chat column, and I'm trying to sort of go through those a bit as I'm chairing this, and I will pull out a few of the questions as they come through. Some I'll direct to Councillor Harrison, and some I will try and address myself, and I may also call on other officers on the call to give some views. If we can't answer them all, and I'm really conscious that time is inevitably running away with us a bit, we'll do our best to come back to you this chat will be saved for a while, and we will make sure that there are responses to questions raised. That's certainly the best that we can at any rate. So before we move into the Q&A, I just wanted to give Climate Emergency Camden, who have been really, as I said earlier, important in the development of the Climate Action Plan, just offer them a couple of minutes to say, just have a few reflections on the Climate Action Plan itself. And I believe that Finn has kindly offered to speak on behalf of Climate Emergency Camden tonight. Are you there, Finn? I know you are, because you've got a few messages in the chat. Over to you for a couple of minutes, Finn.
Thanks very much. To echo Anna's statements earlier, this is certainly interesting, speaking into a sea of icons. I'm just going to read a pre-prepared statement from Climate Emergency Camden that we've agreed on. So these are the thoughts and feelings of the group in response to the Climate Action Plan, and thanks for giving us this space to voice those as well. Climate Emergency Camden welcomes the plan. It has been a long haul, demanding energy and leadership from officials and councillors of all parties, as well as support from business, academia and local communities. Camden Council has been pioneering, and we encourage you to continue to show leadership in this area, not just in the borough, but across London and more broadly with local authorities across the UK. The context in which this plan is being launched could not be more difficult. The COVID-19 crisis has been painful and difficult for so many people, deepening further existing inequalities and exposing others. The financial costs to the council have been tremendous. There is a risk then that the energy and commitment that we've seen over the past 18 months is dissipated as everyone tries to respond to the newest crisis immediately before us, rather than the slower burn, but equally and probably much more dangerous crisis of climate breakdown and mass extinction. We would argue that now is not the moment to slow down on this agenda. It's the moment to double down on it. Not only are the causes and consequences of these multiple crises interlinked, but delivering a greener economy will bring a host of co-benefits, including to the most excluded in our borough. 3 points as such that we'd like to make. Number one, on governance and accountability, Camden has rightly committed to making the borough zero carbon by 2030. We all know this is considerably important, but it is also considerably difficult. To reach the required reduction in our carbon emissions, every one of us will have to reduce our carbon footprint to 1/10 of our current levels. Holding ourselves to account for that will mean setting hard targets and milestones and making sure that we start to make big changes now, not deferring. We would like to see the council develop and publish a series of milestones and targets to measure the delivery of the vision set out in the plan. We would also welcome further detail on proposed governance structure for the plan, building on the constitutional shifts already agreed. We would also like to better understand how citizens will remain involved in supporting and scrutinising progress. And just a note on that, it was obviously good to hear some new disclosures in relation to the scrutiny panel earlier on in the call, and we'll look forward to hearing more on that. Secondly, we would also like to better understand how the Climate Action Plan will be nested in Camden's wider vision for renewal post-COVID. We would underscore the vital importance of delivering an ambitious programme of retrofitting, which has unique potential in terms of job creation and reduction in fuel poverty, while also targeting the major source of carbon emissions in the borough. This is the moment to commit to divest from fossil fuels within the next 5 years and to ensure the council's investments and pension fund help to drive, rather than undermine, recovery locally and globally through responsible investment. We believe this is also the moment for a fundamental review of the way that the council budgets are used. It's great to see such positive action happening to make safer, healthier streets. We hope this marks the beginning of a long-term shift in the way that council budgets for roads are used, refocusing them on making public spaces easier to navigate on foot and by bike. We would also like to see housing budgets overhauled to ensure that they accelerate the shift to a low carbon future. Most immediately, Camden should press pause on the Edmonton incinerator project, which is incompatible with Camden Council's climate and ecological emergency declaration, its climate action plan, and current efforts to build back better and greener. It is also a terrible waste of scarce resources at this very difficult time. And thirdly, this is not just a plan for the council, it is our plan. Collaboration is all important. Only by working together and by bringing people from all walks of life on board can we achieve these tough targets. We've seen a big shift in terms of the council becoming more open and accessible and adopt collaborative ways of working. But everyone will play their part, and that means mass mobilization of the public through active communications and engagement, and actively investing in partnerships to make stuff happen. Help us to help. We would love to see Camden Climate Alliance become much more visible, enabling businesses to play a bigger role in helping to address the climate crisis, and citizens to hold them to account when they do not. Thank you. Thanks again, Harold. I'm going to just share the text of this in the chat box as well, if anyone wants to read.
That's totally fine. Please do that. That's great. And thank you, Finn, and to the rest of Climate Emergency Camden for your contributions and thoughts on this. So look, there are lots of questions. I've been trying to look through them. I just wanted to, there are different themes emerging, but I'm in the first instance just going to hand over to Councillor Harrison on two particular themes which are repeated, about divestment and about weed killer 2 glyphosate, which I think is on people's minds too. So Councillor Harrison, could I just hand over to you to provide some comments back on those two issues in particular? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Finn for your contribution and for everything that everybody at Climate Emergency Camden has been doing. I think we do really agree on most things. I think on divestment, it is worth remembering that Camden does have a much lower exposure to fossil fuel investments than lots of other boroughs, and I think that should be recognised in a way that it hasn't been. I think that's something to be proud of. That includes boroughs that have made an official commitment to divest and are actually lagging behind where Camden is. I do understand your concerns, and I think the time for investing in those companies is coming to an end. But we also need to recognise that the money brings power. It's the biggest pension fund in London, I believe it still is, and that means we have the power to drive decarbonisation across all our investments using that power. So the question is actually a bigger one than just about fossil fuel investment. And I think while that's important, I think it's there is a bit of a risk in focusing on that and saying you divested, or perhaps even divesting and then thinking job done, but it's not job done, because all of our operations, businesses throughout the world, the way we all live have to change. They all have to change, and there is a bit of a risk of that becoming a bit of a fig leaf. I do welcome your question about milestones as well. We will be reporting annually on the progress in the report, and we can certainly share more about the governance as well. The question about glyphosate, it's not directly related to carbon, but we did declare an ecological emergency as well last year, so that's important to remember. It's the case that we always keep the use of glyphosate under review. It's the active ingredient in glyphosate is the one that's present in all weed killer that gardeners up and down the country and around the world use, often quite liberally in their own gardens. We use it in a very tight, very specific way. We make sure that the staff who use it are all have the proper PPE. We only target it on hard standing and only in places where it looks like there are weeds coming through. It's not the case that it's sprayed around in some sort of liberal way. It's very targeted and very controlled, and we always keep it under review should the advice about it change. But at the moment there isn't any actually any advice that suggests it is something we should be stopping using. I think those are those questions, Harold.
Yeah, they were. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I think there are a few more for you as well, but we will also try and give you a hand answering them. And like I said, if we can't answer questions, we will come back to you. There are quite a few questions on transport, I noticed, particularly given all of the, I think, really great work that Camden's been doing, creating safer cycling infrastructure in the borough and creating car-free areas through timed road closures, and some concerns about things like e-scooters and how that might impact disabled people or threaten, create kind of rat runs for new forms of transport that are just as threatening to some sections of the community. I wondered if you had any reflections on the way that the sort of transport strategy is developing.
Yeah, absolutely. Changing the way we all travel is going to be really important to cutting the carbon out of that area of our activity. And we know that a huge percentage of journeys within Camden and in many places across the country are pretty short, under 1 mile or 2 miles, and actually could be taken by different means, whether it's walking or cycling or using the bus. Obviously, at the moment, we're in a situation where people can't use the bus or the tube. More people are cycling. The numbers have gone up quite rapidly. More people are driving too, unfortunately. It's a real, it's just such a tragedy always to see how packed the streets are, and that we're in this situation. So we need to be doing everything we can to reverse that and to head it off and to persuade more people to be taking up cycling. So we already had in our Camden Transport Strategy, which we adopted a couple of years ago, a cycling action plan which set out where we would like to be building infrastructure to help people feel safe cycling around the borough and switching those journeys from those motor journeys that I described earlier to something which is really, has no carbon impact at all. And then in the current situation, the government and the mayor are asking us very clearly to help people make those types of journeys more readily and much more, putting in the infrastructure much more rapidly than in the past. So for that reason, we've been bidding to TfL for money to be building this new cycle infrastructure, which is going well, which you should start to see on our streets over the next few weeks and months. And on e-scooters, for me, the jury is still a bit out on that. I certainly understand people's concerns. I've seen them used in other countries. There are still questions about their safety for the users as well. It looks like the government is going to be introducing them. So it looks like it's going to be something we will have to manage or deal with, but it's allegedly still meant to be very much on a trial basis. So we will do our best to manage that, and certainly be listening very closely to residents' views on that.
Thank you. There are several questions as well about social housing, which I'll try to answer, perhaps with some input from James Davies, who's the senior program manager here on the climate side. The issue of social housing, in the climate action plan, we refer to the carbon impact of our own estate, and Camden does own 30,000 homes in Camden, so almost a third of all of the dwellings in the borough are council owned, and some of them are on pretty old communal heating systems, and of course we also have lots of Victorian street properties in the borough which are inevitably energy inefficient just because of their age. If you were to simply look at the cost of, say you took a £10,000 average cost for improving the energy efficiency of one of those dwellings, you're talking at a £300 million cost, which is way beyond council budget. So we have a major financing issue, I think, for moving council housing towards the zero carbon objectives that can't be overlooked, and I think also lines up well with some of the renewal work that is being discussed about nationally in terms of the retrofitting agenda. But if I could just call in James Davis, who might have a couple of comments on how the council is beginning to look at its social housing. James, could I call you in now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think as people have pointed out, it's a big opportunity and a big challenge for the council. And as we talk about greening our organisation and our buildings, it's something that's really critical. So it's something we're looking at a lot, particularly around the challenge of heat. And there's lots of technical and fascinating points we get to, but as Harold mentioned, there's a big challenge of funding and how we do that in the best way. So we've been working a lot over the past few months with housing colleagues to think about how we can best invest, and if repairs are happening, how do we make that repair climate emergency compatible so that it doesn't need to be done in another 5-10 years to change that heat source to a heat pump, for example, instead of a gas boiler or something like that. So it's something we're looking at a lot, and we will continue. I'll just take the opportunity as well that there's 30,000 homes which are the council. There's about 70,000 which aren't the council. So a big part of that is working with associations like housing associations, but also individuals be that if you own your property or if you rent. And so we have some funding available for certain aspects of that. We have a program called the Camden Climate Fund, which at the moment is offering grant funding for solar installations. So there's a question about businesses. That funding is also available for businesses. So please do have a look at that. And we're going to be working with hopefully the community and thinking about how we could adapt those funds over the coming months and years to better reflect the challenges. So looking at heating, looking at retrofit, and how we can support those as well. Thanks.
Thank you, James. That's great. I'm sure there'll be more questions on that, but I'm happy to. It is I mean, I just can be completely open with you all. It is a major challenge how Camden should or can improve its building stock, not just ours, but across the borough as a whole. It's a significant challenge with a big financial price tag, but with financial savings potentially too. There are quite a few questions I've noticed also about sort of advice and behaviour change, and people having simple kind of information about what they can do. And I just wanted to reassure people that one of the actions in the Climate Action Plan is about a public information campaign that tries to provide that information to residents, simple information. It's also why we want to support Think and Do and the rollout and the development of Think and Do, because that has been a fantastic way to get across to the community what they can do, what are the actions people can take on the climate agenda. I think the sort of challenge opportunity, if you like, for Think and Do is to move into other parts of Camden, not just places like Kentish Town where there's already a very strong interest in the climate agenda, but other parts of Camden, and that obviously links back to this whole inclusivity and equalities agenda that's so important to the borough. So again, we will provide more detail on that. Trying to skim through these questions again, I think there are a few questions also on food waste and recycling on estates, and I wondered if and plastic. I think Councillor Harrison could ask you to say something a little bit about recycling and food waste recycling as well, if possible.
We certainly can do. I mean, under the current arrangements, which we brought in a few years ago, we do make food waste recycling available to most households across the borough. So really, nearly everybody has access to it. We have introduced a variety of different campaigns and efforts to try and increase the rate of recycling of food over the last couple of years, and which have been very successful, especially when it works on a highly localized basis. There is more to do on that front, and actually we were just gearing up to do some new projects on that just before COVID hit. So be happy to speak more about that with I think Emily from Friends of the Earth might have been the one who asked about that, and I think we're meeting soon, so I'd be very happy to talk you through those ideas.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it also related to schools, but perhaps we can pick that one up afterwards. I think that is broadly it. I mean, there are lots of issues in the chat, questions and thoughts about Think and Do as well, so we will hopefully make some connections there on the back of the discussions tonight. I am just, as you can probably tell, just scrolling through them one last time to see if I've missed anything really fundamental. Just bear with me as I just scroll through. Something about pets, which I think I'll have to come back to. I think I'll leave it there. I'm sure there are more, but I apologise. It's difficult to see them all at the moment, and we'll make sure, as I said, that we'll come back on those questions. So I think we could just repeat a little bit about the citizen panel. So Abby, if we could put up the slide. So this is the panel that we are going to establish that will help oversee the Climate Action Plan. As some people mentioned in the call, in the chat function, there have been some changes to Camden's constitution recently that elevate climate and environmental issues higher up. They haven't been fully agreed by council, but they're due to be in the middle of this month, and I think there's a very strong chance they will be adopted. And it's all part of a move towards elevating the environmental agenda within the work that we do. And in the context of transparency and participation, we want to establish this citizen panel, which will build on some of the kind of the strengths of the Citizens Assembly that we had later this year, and as Councillor Harrison explained, we will help people to get up to speed with the climate work so that they feel empowered to review the work that we're doing. And you will see on the page a link here if you're interested in joining. There it is. We're very keen for this to be very representative of the lived experiences of people in Camden and the demographic diversity of the borough too. So that's going to be a key variable in how we recruit to it, to ensure that it really does mirror that representation, that character of Camden. So we're going to open that up, and it's on the We Are Camden webpage. So please share that with people who you think might be interested, or if you want to sign up yourselves, please do. So I think we'll leave it there. I'll just hand back to Councillor Harrison, who might just like to say a couple of words in conclusion. Councillor Harrison, could I hand back to you briefly?
Thanks very much, Harold. Thanks to everybody for coming to this event tonight. Really appreciate all of you being here. Thanks to all of you who input into the Climate Action Plan. It's early days of formation. Thanks to the officers who spent so much time and hard work in putting it together. It's really very much appreciated, and I'm sure we'll make a big difference, especially as we all work together and pull together over the next few years to show how we can really make an impact in this area in a local way, in a way that hopefully will inspire people across the country and across the world. I think Ada earlier on was totally right when she mentioned about the risk of COVID distracting us from this agenda, but actually it should really galvanise us, because it has already showed what can be done on an emergency basis, on an emergency footing in terms of actions, but also in terms of investment from the government and elsewhere. And I think we really need to be carrying forward that spirit to face this emergency and taking others with us. So thanks again for everybody. Thanks to Harold for organising, and look forward to seeing you all soon, I hope.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and thanks for joining.